Good evening, kids. So today we'll revise hydrogen. So here we'll just talk about the important things that we have here. So in hydrogen, what all things we have to focus on? It's with the position of hydrogen that we know very well that it's an anomaly here. It could have been either in alkali metals group or either in this halogens. So that is the first thing. We'll directly go with the sort of questions that we do get here. So if what are the isotopes? How many isotopes of hydrogen do we know? Isotopes of hydrogen. Good. Yes, so it will be three. Those are protium, deuterium, and tritium. Can you tell me among these three, which is the one which is found to be radioactive? Among these three, the one which is radioactive. Yeah, good. So it will be tritium. Now the question for you, respectively, I want you to answer the number of neutrons present. For these three, the number of neutrons present, you have to answer it respectively. Good. Good. So it will be as 0, 1, 2. Yeah, please, it's not 1, 2, 3. It will be as 0, 1, 2. So protium, it will be as 0. I just asked you the number of neutrons. So it will be as 0, 1, and 2. So here itself, we know the forms, the two forms in which the hydrogen exists. Can you tell me those? The two forms in which the hydrogen exists? Okay. So, okay. Oh, it's like a very different things. So you have said para form, it will be gas and liquid, peroxide, hydride, halide, orthopara. Okay, guys. So basically, the allotropes of hydrogen, we have how many allotropes we talk about? So what are the allotropes of these hydrogen? Those are ortho and para. And it's very important that here we know at room temperature. Can you tell me which is found to be major? At room temperature, whose content is found to be more? Very good. No. Oh, it's like mixed answers. Yeah. So here, the allotropes of hydrogen, we have it as ortho and para, in which we'll find that ortho will be somewhere around 75% and para will be as remaining 25. But what happens at low temperature? What happens at low temperature, which will be having a higher content? The one which will be having higher content. Good. At lower temperature, we'll find that it is para which will be found to be more. Because here what we know is that para hydrogen is more stable when compared to that of ortho hydrogen. And at lower temperatures, we'll find the stable one will be having a higher content. That is para hydrogen will be having a higher content when compared to that of the orthohydrogen. We'll just talk about the important parts that we have. So directly we'll go with the hydrides. See here, so these hydrides, we either represent it in the form of, this will be as an element E, and here it will be as HX, or even in the form of as EMHN. So as in, like, these examples are like B2H6 diborane, and here the most common hydrides that we have is like sodium hydride, calcium hydride. See, in this chapter the questions have been very direct. It's like, okay, you have to find out which among the following is an ionic hydride, which among the following is found to be as covalent hydride. So it's the questions have been very direct, so it's better we just try to revise it, and indirectly it's kind of we are doing the questions. So anyway, still at the end, if we do find time, we'll also try to do the questions directly. So here we have three types of hydrides. So first one will be as ionic hydrides. It's better you try to answer here itself. So ionic hydrides are also known as saline hydrides, which means salt-like. Can you tell me which groups have to be considered here for ionic hydrides? Which are the groups that we have to consider for the ionic hydrides? Good. Yeah, that's fine. Yes, so the groups that we are considering here is 1 and 2. And anyways, these will be comprising our S block, right? So these are also, okay, ionic and saline, which are salt-like hydrides, are also known as something. What is that? Can you tell me the term? Okay, the question is, this ionic or saline hydrides are also known as something, as they are dash in nature. So based on that, they have also another name. Can you try to name it? No, 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 it's not this. That will be coming under covalent, like the three forms that we have. Yeah, saline means salt like. Oh, it became alkaline. No. Okay, see here. So in this, as they are stoichiometric in nature, we can also call them to be as stoichiometric hydrides. Okay? Because here we'll be having a definite proportion in which we are considering the element with the hydrogen. So hence we also call them to be as stoichiometric hydrides. Yeah, they do have, but we do have few hydrides like lithium, beryllium, magnesium. They'll be having significant covalent character. But please make it a point that you remember that these hydrides, that is beryllium hydride and magnesium hydrides, are the ones which will be existing as polymers. So, which among the following, okay, the question which came once was, which among the following will be forming polymeric hydrides? So, please remember these two examples. And now a question, if at all we are electrolyzing sodium hydride, can you tell me hydrogen will be obtained at cathode or anode? Hydrogen is obtained at cathode or anode. Good. So here we'll observe that the hydrogen will be obtained at anode. Is it the same thing that we'll be observing for HCl also? If at all I'm taking HCl, even in that case, will I be getting hydrogen at anode? Very good. So most of you have answered that correctly, that yes, the one which will be carrying positive charge is hydrogen over there, and chlorine will be carrying negative charge. So hydrogen is something that will be obtained at cathode in the case of HCl. So just be careful for what they have asked and accordingly try to answer. And here we already know that lithium hydride will be rather unreactive at moderate temperatures with oxygen and chlorine. And it is also used for the formation of mostly the very strong reducing agents. Now moving ahead to the covalent hydrides. Covalent hydrides are also known as, The other name for covalent hydrides. Guys, you have to remember all the names because they might ask you which among the following is covalent hydride or which among the following is whatever I want you to answer. Yeah. Please remember that these are not non-stoichiometric hydrides. We also have the third one, that is metallic. Those are called as non-stoichiometric. So these are not of the third category. These are the second one that I asked you for covalent, or the other name for this is molecular hydride. So please be careful with the names first, because definitely you'll remember the examples, but where you'll be getting confused is with the terms that they are using. So please remember all the terms first and then remember the examples. So covalent hydrides are also called as molecular hydrides. And here we'll basically talk about the hydrides which are formed from the p block elements. Now moving to the other slide. Okay, so in this case, we'll be having three types of hydrides. So the first one to be as electron deficient. Can you tell me which group am I supposed to consider here? Which group? Yeah, good. Guys, firstly, I specified that whatever we are studying here as covalent or molecular hydride, it is forming binary compounds of hydrogen with non-metals. It means it just belongs to P block. So please don't answer in terms of D block. Definitely you have to choose from 13 to 18. And anyways, 18 are already more stable, so they don't prefer to form a binary compound. So it becomes pretty obvious that you have to choose from 13 to 17 group itself. Good. So most of you have answered it correctly. It will be as group 13. Yeah, so it is the boron family. So the best example that we have here is diborane. Okay, another question that we can have from this is, are they used as Lewis acids or Lewis bases? We'll be just revising in terms of the questions what we have got in the previous years. Yeah. Very good. No, check it out. These will be as Lewis acids. See, first of all, it's nothing to do with the hydrogen, because Lewis theory, that is Lewis acid and Lewis base, was something which was dependent on electron. It's electronic one. It's not based on the proton. So the one which is having the ability to accept electron is the one which will be as a Lewis acid. Please don't say seeing the hydrogen and you don't change the theory in terms of proton. So it's just based on the one which is having the ability to accept the electrons will be as Lewis acid, and the one which is having the ability to donate the electrons, it will be as the Lewis bases. Now the second one, that is electron precise. So it means it is having exactly the number that we require for the formation of hydride. So this will be formed by which group? Good. Yes, it will be as group 14. No, it's not 15, it is group 14. Yeah, please remember the specific groups and an example. So here the best example that we have is like CH4. Now coming to the third one, that is electron rich. What are the groups that I'll have here? The groups that will be comprising electron rich molecules. Good. Okay, now. Okay, it's by mistake what you have written. Okay. Yeah, so it's 15, 16 and 17. So it's from group 15 to 17 that we'll be having for this electron rich. So if at all we consider the example from group 15, like ammonia, from group 16, like water, And from group 17, let it be like HF. So these are the examples that we have. Okay, now whether these are Lewis acids or Lewis bases becomes pretty obvious. Yeah. So these will be as Lewis bases. See, already okay, nitrogen will be having one lone pair, and oxygen is having two, whereas fluorine will be having three. So as they do have the ability to donate these electrons, hence they are named as the Lewis bases. So please remember that this Lewis theory is based on the lone pair electron donor or electron acceptor. Now the third one that we have is metallic or non-metallic hydrides. It's relatively that we have said there. Okay, so metallic, so please don't consider your covalent compounds to be as non-stoichiometric. Even those are found to be stoichiometric, but the exact term, it is more precise to use it for S block elements. And these are the ones metallic or non-stoichiometric. We do have also another term for this. Can you try to name that? First of all, try to remember all the names. Yeah. Oh, it's chemistry class. Maybe by mistake you would have typed that. Okay, so it's interstitial. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, so here we'll be having it as interstitial hydrides. Okay, here there are few points that we have to remember. So yes, mostly that it is the one which is formed by D and F block elements. That's pretty obvious here. But we have to remember, I have already taught you the group that will be forming hydride gap. Okay, can you tell me those groups which are comprising my hydride gap? This was a previous year question. First of all, 18th group is nowhere forming these metallic or non-stoichiometric hydrides. So definitely it's not 18. First of all, see here, we are already done with the groups of S block and P block. So the only options that you have is thinking about your D block. Even in that, you have to just think from 3 to 12. Yeah, be specific that what are the groups. It's only 3 of you who have answered correctly. So please remember the metals of group 7, 8 and 9. So these are the groups which do not form hydrides. Hence, they are considered as hydride gap. So group 7, 8 and 9, these are the ones which will not be forming any hydrides. Hence, they are considered as hydride gap. And now a question. Even in group 6, there's only one element which forms the hydride. What is that? First of all, you have to remember the elements there. And then you have to say the one which will be forming hydride. Good. So it is chromium. So it's only chromium in group 6 which is having the ability to form hydride, and remaining will not be forming the hydrides. So this was a very important thing that we had it in metallic or non-stoichiometric hydrides. And we know like they'll be existing as they do not have a proper stoichiometry. Hence they are named as non-stoichiometric. Like 1.5 to 1.8. So this is how we have it. And here another important property that these interstitial hydrides have is the ability of adsorption. Like they'll be playing a major role in catalytic reduction and hydrogenation. So even in that, they'll be having a major role. So the best advantage, yeah, it's only chromium that will be forming hydride in group 6. Yeah, remaining are not going to form. And they have high potential for the hydrogen storage. So these are the important things that we have for hydrides. Now moving ahead with water. Oh, is it? Okay. Is it fine now? Tell me the angle here, the bond angle, and even the shape. Okay, your questions in terms of water, you have to first tell me the shape, the bond angle. Guys, it's better you even remember the dipole moment. Good. So it will be as bent, whereas the angle is 104.5 degrees. And the dipole moment is, most of you have not answered. Yeah, it's as 1.85 dBi. Yeah, you can just take it as 1.84 or 1.85 dBi. And also remember OH bond length, that will be as 95.7 picometers. This is the OH bond length. Yeah. So coming to the structure of ice, the structure of ice it will be highly ordered, that is 3-dimensional hydrogen bonded structure. Even there, you have to remember few things. Those are, okay, let me ask you a question here. Once it was like you have to choose the correct statement regarding these. So each oxygen atom in the structure of ice is surrounded by how many other oxygen atoms? Your question is, in the structure of ice, each oxygen atom is surrounded by how many other oxygen atoms? Good. It should be 4. First of all, it is surrounded tetrahedrally, so it will be surrounded by 4. Yeah. 4 other oxygen atoms. And this is what is giving rather an open type structure, which is like cage-like structure. And the crystalline form of water is ice, and it will be in the form of hexagonal form, whereas at low temperature, it will be in which form? The crystalline form is in hexagonal form, whereas at low temperature, it will exist in some other form. What is that? Good. It will be as the cubic form. Yeah. See, in terms of the properties, we already know the amphoteric nature. We do use a proper term here. Can you just give me the terminology by seeing the reaction here? Give the proper term for this reaction. What is the property that is being proved by this? That term is very important. Good. I'm asking the type of reaction, not about the nature. Yeah, it is definitely proving the amphoteric nature of water, but what is this type of reaction called? Good. So it will be as autoprotolysis, or the other term that we can use here is self-ionization. Now my question to you is, Whatever we have done for this water, can we do the same way for ammonia? So the question here is autoprotolysis or self-ionization possible for ammonia? Yes or no? Can't we have any autoprotolysis products for that? Mm-hmm. No, it's not in Haber's process. Good. Very good. Guys, so the answer is yes. I didn't ask you to prove the amphoteric nature. The question was not to prove the amphoteric nature of ammonia. Definitely, I'm not even asking you that they are amphoteric or anything. I just asked that whether they do have the ability to undergo self-ionization, that is, autoprotolysis is possible for ammonia or not. So now try to answer what will be the products there. So let it be aqueous. Try to answer what will be the product there. So please remember that yes, self-ionization or autoprotolysis is also possible for ammonia. Good. Good. So it will be as NH4 plus and the other one to be as NH2 minus. So yes, we do observe the autoprotolysis of even ammonia. Now directly going to the hydrolysis reactions, please remember all the reactions involved in hydrolysis. Those are very important. You have to know the product, and especially one important reaction is, try to tell me the products form. Okay, so here are the products. There's a very important reaction. They preferred to ask. Good. No, it's not oxygen. It's not combustion so that I should get carbon dioxide and water. No. Okay. So here the product that will be formed is, that is calcium hydroxide and the other one to be as acetylene. So remember this, that it is the acetylene that is formed here. Okay, similarly, if at all I give you calcium carbide and here as D2O. D2O, what is the other name for D2O? The other name for D2O. Yeah, good. So it is heavy water. Try to tell me what is going to form here. Like in place of acetylene, what am I going to form? Try to name those two. Try to name those two. Yeah. Everyone is writing the products correctly. Try to name those two, please. Oh, that's a new one. Good. Yeah, that's correct. Okay, so see here, this will be some kind of line. No. Okay, here it will be as D. So this is deuterocalcium. We can just say it as calcium deuteroxide. And here it will be as deuteroacetylene. Don't put it as heavy here. It will be as deuteroacetylene. And this is calcium deuteroxide. The next important thing is, in terms of copper, see, copper sulfate will be existing as pentahydrated form. But if we just try to see the structure in terms of X-ray crystallography, we'll be finding that it is having hydrogen bonded water molecule in that. How many among that will be hydrogen bonded? This is a previous year question. What is the common name for copper sulfate 5? That is the pentahydrated form. Can you tell me the common name for that? Good. Yeah, so this is how it exists, and here you can see it's just one that is involved in hydrogen bonding. And how many are coordinated? And yes, the ones who have answered for that copper sulfate pentahydrated form, yes, the common name is blue vitriol. Good. And how many are how many are forming the coordination here? The coordinated water molecules? 4. So please remember that. Can you give me an example for interstitial water? Okay. The example for interstitial water? No, interstitial water is not heavy water. It will be barium fluoride 2H2O. See, interstitial water means water is going and occupying the interstitial position. That's what it means to be as the interstitial water. So the hydrates will have 3 types. That will be as coordinated hydrates, interstitial hydrates, and the other one to be as hydrogen bonded water, or the hydrates that we have. So these are the forms that we'll be having in which the hydrates exist. Now moving ahead with the most important topic that we have in this chapter is hard and soft water. So hard and soft water, first of all, tell me what are the cations which will be causing hardness to water? The cations which are forming hardness to water. Cations. Yeah. So it's only 2 who have answered. Yeah, that's correct. So it will be as calcium and magnesium. Now, what are the anions involved causing hardness? What are the anions involved to cause the hardness to water? No. Good. Yeah, correct. Please name all the 3. Yeah, good. So these are bicarbonates, then chlorides, and even sulfates. So these are the three anions which will be causing hardness to water. See, whatever it be in hardness, the cations will be always the same. Now, hardness we can just divide it into two categories, that will be as temporary and permanent. So the one which causes temporary hardness, it's only the anions which will be the deciding factor for the temporary hardness. The cations are anyways going to remain same in case of temporary and even permanent hardness. So the one which is causing temporary hardness among these three anions is, try to answer that. Good. So it will be bicarbonates which are causing temporary hardness to water. So it's the bicarbonate salts of calcium and magnesium which are causing temporary hardness. Whereas chloride, sulfate salts of calcium and magnesium will cause permanent hardness. How can we remove temporary hardness? So now removal of temporary hardness. Yeah, by boiling. You have to even remember the reactions here. What will be the product upon heating these two? Upon heating magnesium bicarbonate, what is the product formed? Yeah, the second method, that will be as Clark's method. We'll just talk after this boiling one. Yeah, first try to answer what will be the products that will be formed upon heating magnesium bicarbonate and also heating calcium bicarbonate. What will be the product that is going to form? Okay. So good that most of you have answered it correctly. See here, yes, it will be as magnesium hydroxide, but not as magnesium carbonate. Few of you have still answered it to be as magnesium carbonate. It's not as magnesium carbonate, rather than here it is magnesium hydroxide. Can you tell me why? Why did we find that it is magnesium hydroxide which is being formed here? But whereas in case of calcium bicarbonate, I'm getting here as calcium carbonate, water and carbon dioxide. Can you just tell me why is it that I'm finding magnesium hydroxide and not magnesium carbonate? Good. No, it's not about the acidic character. Yes, so what we'll be finding is that the solubility product of magnesium hydroxide is higher when compared to that of magnesium carbonate. That's how we'll find the formation of magnesium hydroxide. So this is again, this was last year question itself. The products that you had to identify upon heating these. So yeah, the second method is Clark's method for the removal of temporary hardness. The second method is Clark's method. So in this, what are we supposed to be adding? What are we supposed to be adding here? Good. So we are going to add here as amount of lime is being added, that to the calculated amount. So basically we are going to add here as calcium hydroxide. So even in this case, try to give the products. Remember the reactions properly in these cases. The products that will be formed here. Good. So here we'll find it as calcium carbonate and water, whereas here it will be as calcium carbonate, magnesium hydroxide and water. So if we just balance this, it will be, yeah. So this is how, and here it will be as 2. Yeah, done. So the next ones that we have is for the removal of permanent hardness. Let me directly ask you the way they have asked questions. So yes, we can treat it with washing soda. Just tell me the chemical composition of washing soda. That will be enough. So for removal of permanent hardness now, the chemical composition of washing soda. We also have to do some numericals based on hydrogen peroxide and hard water. Yeah, good. So it will be as sodium carbonate. Now the next one, what are we supposed to use in Calgin's method? What is Calgin? What is Calgin? Good, that is sodium hexametaphosphate. So that is Na6P6O18, or you can also remember it as NaPO3 will be taken 6 times. So it will be like fully all this. We can just take all this as 6 times. Yeah. So this is how you'll be getting it as sodium hexametaphosphate. In ion exchange method, what are we supposed to use? In ion exchange method, what are we supposed to use? Good. This method is also called as zeolite or permuted process, in which we are supposed to be using sodium aluminium silicate. Yes, so this is how we'll be using. And then coming to the synthetic resins method, in that we'll be using cation and the anion exchanges. So these are the major ones that we have it. Now directly moving on to the hydrogen peroxide. See, for hydrogen peroxide, you also have to remember the preparations. So in terms of preparations, it is prepared from the sodium peroxide, which we call it as Merck's process. We can also use barium peroxide for the formation of hydrogen peroxide. And coming to the industrial methods, it is by the sulfuric acid. Then even ethyl anthraquinone is also used for the formation of hydrogen peroxide. Okay, it is Merck's process. From sodium peroxide, if we are preparing, that will be as Merck's process. So in pure form, hydrogen peroxide will be basically as pale blue color. And here what we have to focus is expressing strength. So we have got questions based on expressing strength of hydrogen peroxide. Okay, so here what is meant by this 10 volume, 20 volume, 30 volume? What does it mean? So if at all I ask you what is meant by this 10 volume solution of hydrogen peroxide, what does it mean? Try to tell that. I want you to answer that 10 volume of hydrogen peroxide. What does that mean? Okay, always remember these volumes means they are always just giving you the volume of oxygen directly, but always your amount of hydrogen peroxide that you have taken is always fixed. So it is 1 ml of hydrogen peroxide solution at STP or NTP will give 20 ml of O2. Remember, whatever the units that you have taken here, I have to take the similar unit here. If you are expressing here as 1 centimeter cube, here also it will be as 20 centimeter cube. And if here you have taken it as 1 liter, so here there also it will be as 20 liters. So this is how it means. Similarly, if it's 20 volume, what it means is it's 1 ml of hydrogen peroxide solution at STP, which will be giving, okay, it's 10 volume I have asked, so here also it will be as 10. So with 20 volume, so there also it will be as 1 ml of hydrogen peroxide solution at STP will give 20 ml of O2. So it's always, this volume is directly telling us the volume of O2. But remember, nowhere we are going to change the volume of hydrogen peroxide. So 30 ml solution, which one is found to be stronger? Yeah, we can take it in liters. If this is expressed in liters, even this has to be in terms of liters. That's what I'm telling you, whatever the units that you have taken. So in simple term, if you want me to answer there, you can just take it as this 1 volume of hydrogen peroxide is giving me 10 volumes of O2. So whatever units you want to use, please make sure that it is same. It should not be that one will be in ml and the other one that you have taken in liters, until and unless you have really converted it. That's how we have to do it. Now a question for you. So if at all they have asked us to calculate the strength, how are we supposed to do that? Okay, so here it's a previous year question. The volume strength of 1.5 normal hydrogen peroxide solution is. Try to answer this, and similarly volume strength of 1.8 normal hydrogen peroxide solution is. Try to answer for these two. The volume strength you have to answer here. Good. It's only one who has answered. Yeah. Good. No, that's not correct. Okay, see here, always remember a few things. I'm just giving you as key points. What will be the equivalent mass of hydrogen peroxide? The equivalent mass of hydrogen peroxide. If you remember these, it'll be very easy for you to solve such questions. Good. It'll be as, yeah, see, if you are going for molecular mass, it's 34, but that 34 has to be divided by 2. So you will get it as 17. Yeah, so here the answer will be as 17. The equivalent mass I asked, I didn't ask you just the molecular mass. Remember, the equivalent mass of hydrogen peroxide has to be taken as 17. Whereas whenever we are calculating the volume strength of hydrogen peroxide, remember this, it is always normality into 5.6. Because here again, it's like 17. If you just try to take it, here it's normality into 5.6. Now, can you tell me what will it be in terms of molarity? If it's molarity, what will be the factor that I have to take here? No. Okay, this is correct. The other one. Good. So again, you have to multiply with a factor of 2. So here you will get it as 11.2. So just be careful with such questions. If they have mentioned normality, so I have to just take with the factor of 5.6. But if they have specified molarity, please consider the factor of 11.2. So here I'll be getting it as 8.4. And here I'll be getting it as 10.08. So just you have to multiply 1.5 into 5.6. Even here it's 1.8 into 10.08. So these are very simple ones. You need not go for a lengthy calculations. You can just remember these and then you can go for solving such questions. Yeah, you can just fix it up. Oh no, it is only fixed for this hydrogen peroxide. Yeah. So the next one, it's better first we'll talk about the degree of hardness. So how to solve questions based on that. It's very simple. We'll always define this degree of hardness in terms of number of parts of calcium carbonate or something that is equivalent to this calcium or magnesium salts present in a million parts of water. So here what it means is that my 50 grams of calcium carbonate is similar to how many grams of magnesium sulfate. So you have to just take the equivalent weights. So as this salt was having the mass of 100, it is 100 by 2. So I'll get it as 50 grams. So similarly, try to do for this salt. Okay, I'm giving you the molecular weight of this magnesium sulfate to be as 120. So tell me it will be equivalent to how many grams? Good. It will be equivalent to that of 60 grams of magnesium sulfate. Similarly, for calcium chloride, if it is 111 grams, the molecular mass. So how many grams of calcium chloride? So always try to express whatever the salt given to you in terms of calcium carbonate. Good. So it will be as 55.5 grams. So here directly let me ask you a question. Tell me what will be the degree of hardness in a water sample which is having 36 mg of magnesium sulfate per kg of water. Calculate the degree of hardness in a water sample containing 36 mg of magnesium sulfate per kg of water. You have to always remember that you have to answer here in terms of ppm. Good. Many are yet to answer. Okay, let me solve one for you. Good. So see here, we know that 10 to the power 3 ml, or simply if I say 10 to the power of 3 grams of water will be containing 36 mg of magnesium sulfate. So here, if at all I want to take it as 10 to the power 6 gram of water, what will be the amount of my magnesium sulfate in that? It should be as 36 into 10 to the power of 3 mg, which means 36 grams of magnesium sulfate. Shall I move to the next slide? So here what it means is that 1 mole of magnesium sulfate is equivalent to 1 mole of calcium carbonate. This is from the definition of degree of hardness. So here we know it's 120 grams. Okay, we have anyways used that better one is 60 grams of this magnesium sulfate is equivalent to 50 grams of calcium carbonate. If we just solve this, and here if you are taking 36 grams of magnesium sulfate, what are we supposed to get for this calcium carbonate? That will be as 30 grams. So if we have got that as 30 grams of calcium carbonate, so that's how it will be as 30 ppm. So this is how we'll be solving such questions based on hardness. So again, important properties of hydrogen peroxide. See, they prefer to ask questions. A particular reaction is given to you and you have to answer whether it is proving. Okay, I'll say it again once. Let me just finish it. Just 3 more minutes. I'll just finish everything and then I'll repeat for that calculation of degree of hardness. Remember that hydrogen peroxide is having very important properties like of acidic nature. Then it is used as both oxidizing and reducing agent. But the questions that might be confusing is a particular reaction is given to you, and then you have to answer whether it is showing the oxidizing nature, or whether in this it is mentioning the acidic character or basic nature. For that, you can only solve if you have seen all the reactions which are directly given in your textbook. So please take care of the reactions there. And we also know that hydrogen peroxide also acts as a very good bleaching agent. Now here, final thing that we have is with respect to heavy water, these reactions are very important. One we have already covered. This one we have already talked about. Remaining 3, please try to answer and then we can end up. I'll again revise hardness of water for the ones who didn't get this. You can answer this, and the ones who have got everything, they can leave. And the ones who want me to explain the hardness of water, I'll just do it again. You answer these 4. Anyways, this was already answered, so let me directly write it. The remaining 3. So these are very important reactions. Good. Good. Yes, this will be as deuterosulfuric acid. This is deuterophosphoric acid. Balance. Yeah, this will be 3. This will be 2. Yeah. And whereas aluminium carbide, that is used for the formation, first of all, it will be forming aluminium deuteroxide. And here it will be as deuteromethane. Please focus here what is being formed. So aluminium carbide is used for the formation of methane. Remember that. And calcium carbide is used for the preparation of acetylene. And if they have added D2O, I will be getting here as deuteroacetylene. Whereas if they have added D2O to aluminium carbide, I'll be getting as deuteromethane. So yeah, these were the major things that we had it in hydrogen. And yeah, so we don't have any class tomorrow and day after. We'll directly have it on Monday. So Monday we'll revise S block. We'll just continue in the similar manners, S block and then P block. So yeah, the ones who want me to explain degree of hardness, only those can stay back, and remaining you can leave the session. Okay, so I'll just start from here. See here, so degree of hardness, it is defined as the number of parts of calcium carbonate. So always remember that this degree of hardness is always expressed in terms of calcium carbonate, and which will be also equivalent to that of calcium and magnesium salts, which are present in million parts of water. That's the reason here we'll be representing it in terms of ppm, because parts per million, that will be as into 10 to the power of 6. So in million parts of water, what will be the number of parts of this calcium carbonate that is present? So if you are trying to find out equivalent weight of calcium carbonate, see, it's always the molecular weight. Molecular weight of calcium carbonate is 100, and then dividing by the N factor. So N factor in this salts is always either the total charge on cations or either the total charge on anions. So if you take just calcium 2 plus, or else if you take carbonate with 2 minus, so whatever it be, it will be always as 100 by 2. Similarly, if I'm trying to take again the equivalent weight of magnesium sulfate, it's 120 the mass and N factor is 2, that is 60 grams. So this is how we have got these 3. Similarly, here also calcium chloride, that will be as 111, dividing it by 2, I'll get it as 55.5. Now, a question that was asked was degree of hardness in a water sample containing 36 mg of magnesium sulfate per kg of water. So if this is supposed to be done, so let us assume per kg. So it means 10 to the power of 3 grams or 10 to the power of 3 mLs, because your water will know that density, will just take it as 1. So here the volume and mass will be equal, that is 10 to the power of 3 ml or 10 to the power 3 grams of water is equivalent to 36 mg of magnesium sulfate. But now I want to express in terms of, see, it's parts per million. So I want in terms of 10 to the power of 6. So 10 to the power of 6 grams of water means this also has to be multiplied with 10 to the power of 3 here. And this final whole thing is giving me in terms of 36 grams. Now, so this we have already known from the definition of degree of hardness, that is 1 mole of magnesium sulfate is equivalent to 1 mole of calcium carbonate. That's 50 grams of this calcium carbonate, and here it's 60 grams of magnesium sulfate. Now, this is what they have asked in the question. They have given in the question, that is 36 grams of this magnesium sulfate will be having how many parts of this calcium carbonate. So as it is 36 grams, it will be as 30 ppm. The reason why this is 36 grams, that was taken in 10 to the power of 6 grams. So which means whatever you have taken in 10 to the power of 6 grams of water, at that point, what am I supposed to get the weight of this calcium carbonate? So hence that will be expressed in terms of parts per million. I couldn't have continued with 10 to the power of 3 ml because the definition itself says that I have to continue that in parts per million, what will be the amount of calcium carbonate. I hope it's clear now. You can just tell me the slides which I am supposed to show you. I think everything was fine. So no slides to show. Fine, then I'll leave meeting.